Hi, welcome to the video. So today we will talk about query parameters in Angular, as well as touch on dependency injection, which is required to implement the query parameter functionality. So before we begin, I'm going to need you to create an Angular app with the routing already configured. Once you're done that, generate a component and call it home. The TS file is empty, it's a blank component. HTML, okay, just the default stuff is okay. And then one last thing, in the app.component.html, please write the component tag in there so that the home component loads by default. And that's it. We're ready to move on to the rest of the tutorial. Alright, so I'm at the home.component.ts now. And before we can use the query parameters functionality, there's a workflow that we have to follow. And the first step is to import the activated root service from the Angular router package. The second step is to create an instance of it in our constructor. Now we have to worry about where to store the query parameter itself, right? Where to store the data. And very simple, just create a variable called, let's call it qparams, and it will be of type string, because a query parameter for all intents and purposes is just a string, right? So that's where we can store it. So the setup is mostly complete. We have access to many methods in the activated root service, one of which is the query parameters method, and we have to think about where to put it, right? Typically for query parameters you want to put it in the ng-on-init method, because once you store it in the variable you can do whatever with it, manipulate it, or send it to another component. But yeah, this is the best place to write the main code. Alright, so I just wrote the main body of the code. The next section will be dedicated to explaining this service injection process, and I'll even go over the this part right here, right? So it's like an explainer section. If you don't need that, I'm going to write a time that you can skip to, so we can finish the rest of the setup and even see the app in action. So what we just did there was a process known as dependency injection, and it's a series of steps. Basically, our query parameter method lies within the service, but it's not as simple as just importing it at the top. We have to create an instance of it in our constructor as our component is loading. It basically sets it up for us, but after that it's pretty straightforward, right? We can see the connection here in that we're accessing the query params method. And as for using the query params method, we cannot just grab a value in the traditional manner. We have to use what's called an observable. The reason for this is that the query parameter over time it can change, right? And so what an observable does is that it tracks the value, and well, anytime we want to get the most updated value we have to subscribe to it. Okay, so this is the syntax to basically listen to the most updated value of the observable, which in this case is our query parameter. And within this function we see, okay, well, we see the qparam string here. We know that this will return a string. An important point is that this ID has to match with the one in the browser URL. Okay, but other than that, it's still pretty straightforward. Basically, the important thing to know is that we have to use the subscribe method. Alright, so let's finish the rest of the setup. What we have to do now is to see that it works, basically, right? So how do you do that? Well, one way is just to display it in the HTML code, right? So why don't we do that? So what this will do is it can access the qparams variable and display it in the HTML. It's called interpolation. And now we will see this when we load our app. So I went ahead and ran the ng-serve command, and we see the app works. What the query parameter did through all of this work is that it just grabs this value, okay, and store it in a variable. We name the qparams, and we display it through the HTML template using interpolation.